ASIO is celebrating its 75th anniversary, as only ASIO would, by staging an exhibition to which no one is invited except former ASIO officers. And 7:30.
We were founded 75 years ago because Australia was penetrated by Soviet spies. Today, we're dealing with foreign spies, including Russian spies. But through 75 years, a lot has changed. Terrorism emerged in the 60s, and today we're dealing with terrorism, politically motivated violence, espionage and foreign interference. It's all grounded in our history. We were here to catch spies, and today we catch spies and stop terrorists.
One of the most famous defections in ASIO's history was secured only 5 years after it was formed.
In April 1954, Vladimir Petrov, an official at the Russian embassy in Canberra, sought political asylum in Australia after an ASIO agent had discovered that he was spying for the Soviet Union.
The Petrovs were Russian or Soviet spies based out of the Canberra embassy. They were spying in Australia, they were running agents. ASIO found them, developed a relationship with Mr. Petrov, got him to defect. His wife then joined us, despite the Russians trying to take her out of the country.
In that very famous footage.
Angry crowds demonstrated at Sydney Airport when Mrs. Petrov, who had been detained in protective custody at the embassy, was to be taken back to Russia.
But it's a great moment 5 years after forming, massive win. And the massive win was not just the defection. As a result of his and her defection, 500 Soviet spies were identified operating in Western countries, including Australia, and they were all dealt with.
The morning after the night before in the Melbourne suburb of Hawthorne, the 23rd of October 1970, a few hours after a bomb had blasted the offices of the Yugoslavian consulate.
Do you think that people forget that there were actually extremist bombings in Australia, in Sydney?
Yes, it's had different forms, but politically motivated violence, including bombs, acts of terror, politically motivated, have been a thing throughout our history. In the early days, Croatians, we had some politics that came to this country, attempted bombings or attempted killings, all in the name of a politically cause, which wasn't really an Australian thing, but we're a multicultural society, so it was a thing.
They've also learned very little from fragments found in this car, demolished by 2 bombs at the Jewish social club Hakoah in Bondi last night.
Launch forward to today, the Hakoah Club bombing. Obviously terrorist evidence that's suggesting it was a retaliation against Israel's invasion of southern Lebanon. That was in 1982. It's now 2024, and look what we're concerned about.
How quickly we forget.
That's correct. So that's, again, a formative part of our history.
When it says a terrorist group retaliating, did we not say who it was? Do we know who it was?
I don't think we know who it was. That's not left out. And obviously the case remains finding out actually who did it.
Yes.
Actually, it's an open case today.
Today, ASIO works in the digital world. The exhibition is a reminder of its analogue past.
So that's a hidden camera inside a novel, an Agatha Christie novel. It's actually a series of novels. And this was being used, so in this case we have a ASIO officer sitting on a park bench with this novel pointing at his target. The officer's waiting for his target and expect a suspected terrorist to come into frame. It's the clever people. How do you hide a camera in a magazine or in a camera in a cigarette pack or behind a tie? As you're talking to a target, you can get some covert shots.
They really did it.
Actually, for those familiar with the James Bond franchise and the movies, and George Lazenby, the one and only Aussie James Bond, he actually used that camera in the movie. ASIO was actually using the same technology.
That technology, just like the movies, included disappearing ink.
There was an Australian lady, Kay Marshall. She was put in place and developed a relationship with one of the Russian spies, Skripal, working out of the embassy. He would write messages to her through invisible ink. So the 2 test tubes there's the invisible ink and there's the chemical that she would wipe over the paper so she could read the messages.
The secret writing appears in the top left-hand corner.
This device here, which is a messaging encryptor, he gifted that to her, disguised as a hairdryer. Her task was to go to Adelaide and hand it over to a Soviet spy. We wrapped up Skripal immediately after that because obviously we thought something might be up.
Mr. Skripal, have you anything to add to the statement already made to the embassy?
What happened to Kay?
So she, I guess, went on to live a good life, but she served this organisation exceptionally well.
You've just taken me through some of ASIO's history. Some of those cases, how long do they stay open for?
So the Petrov case, for example, just closed this year. So that's 70th anniversary of their defection. That case was running for 70 years.
Why was it open for so long?
Well, in part because those officers, actually, the Soviet spies, were given an assumed identity, as in a different identity, and they lived their lives out here in Australia. We needed to protect them. And there's some operational details around that and how we got to where we did, because the Russians would have spent a long time trying to figure that out and find out where they were.
You don't let a lot of people into this building. This exhibition won't be open to the public, but you are more open than your predecessors. How do you work out where the boundary is for transparency in a secret organisation?
So firstly, I think it's fundamentally important in this modern society. Everyday Australians understand there is a security service, what we do and why it matters, and the laws in which we operate and the oversight we're subject to. I think in a modern society you can't hide the security service. That would be unacceptable to me and my officers. So that's important. In terms of the balance though, because it's transparency to a point, everything I say is run through capability protection, that's technical jargon, where we think about would that expose intelligence sources and methods, put people at harm or help us or result in us losing a capability to do the job we do. Again, because what we do, terrorist spies must think is impossible. That's part of our success.
So that's worth the risk of getting caught up in politics, as you have been recently.
So politics and robust political debate is a healthy part of society. I'll stay out of that, so I won't even acknowledge that that's the case.
We hear you talking about technology a lot in relation to security threats, and you talk about the fact that bad actors are early adopters of technology. So with all of that focus, how do we understand the role of human intelligence at ASIO?
So human intelligence is paramount for us. We impact people's lives. It's humans that make the decisions, not the computer. We develop relationships with people who become our human sources, and our agents themselves, our intelligence officers, actually help people betray their country in the name of our security or betray their ideology in the name of the country's security. Incredibly important capability that will help us weather the storm of the technological change that actually does make it harder. Everyday messaging apps, what we call end-to-end encryption. Under a warrant, we can get the ones and zeros. We can't decipher the ones and zeros, so we don't know whether those violent extremists are plotting to kill someone or talking about the football. That's important. That's a technology change. Another way around that, though, is to get a human source in that network who knows what's going on and reports to us what they're up to, so we and the police can take action if we need to.
Well, I'll come back to the ones and the zeros in a minute, but you said recently that artificial intelligence will allow a step change in adversary capability. How is that? How will they use it to threaten us?
So there's many ways they do that. At the moment, we don't see artificial intelligence as a new threat in its own right, but artificial intelligence can help countries do espionage at scale, foreign interference at scale, and even sabotage at scale. How to cleverly lay down software on a critical infrastructure network to turn the power grid off. AI can help you. AI can help you write code faster. So it's an accelerator of existing threats. It can generate fake personas online. It could be used to cultivate relationships with people online, but you're actually talking to an AI bot, not a human being. And it's actually drawing you into a sense of indebtedness, asking you questions which are inappropriate, and maybe identifying vulnerabilities about yourself. Of course, on the flip side, we can use AI to find that and counter that at the same rate our adversaries and targets can. You
said before ones and zeros. Just explain what the ones and zeros are.
So if you and I are talking on a WhatsApp or Signal, those ones and zeros are machine translatable, but obviously it's encrypted, so the computer and the human can't make sense of it unless you've got the key. And it's designed in a way that it's hard to get the key, so therefore it's encrypted and unreadable by humans. That's a problem. It's a problem for my agency, so we have to have other ways around that. And the way the computer is at the moment, you can't decrypt it on a supercomputer, so I have to actually get a human close to you, or under warrant, I could get on your phone and get to the messages that way.
Do you use encrypted messaging apps?
We do, and I do, yes. And that's actually a good thing. And so everyday Australians using those apps, no problem with that. I argue, though, that if you actually break the law or you're a threat to security, you lose your right to privacy. And what I've been asking for those companies that build messaging apps, respond to the lawful request. So when I have a warrant, you give me access to that communication.
But they're not, are they?
No, they're not.
So you said earlier this year that you don't need new laws, but clearly you're still not getting the cooperation you wanted from the tech companies, is that right?
Correct. So when Rhys Kershaw and I did the press conference address, that was asking for cooperation, not meaning to give a hard time to those companies. Again, arguing under law in this country, if we have a warrant for lawful access, they should help us get that lawful access. It's targeted, proportionate. We're not asking for mass surveillance. We need their cooperation. If they don't cooperate, then there's a private conversation I need to have with government about what we accept or what I need to do my job more effectively.
But are you still getting the same resistance from the tech companies?
So I've had a few companies come and talk to me since that time, which is good. I'll leave those conversations in private. Some of them are good. I might be about to have a difficult conversation, but we'll do that in private as well because I think it's appropriate to do that there.
With whom?
Again, I think calling companies out at this stage is not appropriate. It certainly doesn't help with hopefully a professional negotiation with them.
This is how Meredith Whittaker from Signal put it. She said, it's either or. Either tech companies can offer encryption to all who need it, and including people who really need it, or those channels can't ever be secure for users. Is it as black and white as that?
No, I don't think so. I understand her perspective. I understand there are people who really need it in some countries, but in this country we're subject to the rule of law, and if you're doing nothing wrong, you've got privacy because no one's looking at it. If there are suspicions or we've got proof that we can justify you doing something wrong and you must be investigated, then actually we want lawful access to that data.
But I think what she's saying is once there's a back door, once there's a back door made available to ASIO, there's a back door available to the FSB or the Iranian intelligence, to somebody else, to someone going after Navalny's organisation.
Again, I understand that perspective, but that's a matter for the companies in terms of which law they choose to operate, if they want to operate in a country. And actually, I don't accept that actually lawful access is a backdoor or systemic weakness, because that, in my mind, will be a bad design. I believe you can, these are clever people, design things that are secure, that give secure lawful access. Who you choose to give that to, surely is a matter for the company.
So how many times in the last 12 months have you used powers to compel tech companies to give you information?
So I don't want to talk about that in public.
But it is something that you have done?
It's something I'm considering doing.
Now?
Correct.
At that event you're talking about, Rhys Kershaw said that Meta's decision to roll out its messaging system without encryption is a disgrace. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, I do.
Why is it a disgrace?
Because effectively in the real world it's saying there's a suburb that Meta controls that law enforcement or security intelligence can't operate in. And I don't believe our society, you can accept there is portions of the internet that are not accessible by law enforcement or the security service. And I'm not saying in a mass surveillance way, I'm just saying if we've got justification to look inside that person's communications and we can justify it to an Attorney General or judge, we should get the cooperation of the company and not have something built in a way where they can say, sorry, too bad, we designed it in a way where we can't help you.
Mike Burgess, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.